Dear students, good morning. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 18th May 2018. The first article is about Karnataka elections and aftermath. So, in Karnataka elections, you know that there is no single party emerged victorious, and BJP is emerged as the single largest party, and JDS and Congress have formed a post alliance coalition and which enjoys the necessary numbers. In this context, governor has called the single largest party to form the government. This brought the governor's office into question. How it is performing. So see here, whenever there is hung assembly, there is a constitutional gap to explain or to direct the situations. In this context, in Bombay judgment, the Supreme Court has clearly stated that the governor can call for an alliance or a party or group to form the government. Here, the Supreme Court's mind is like this. Anything that has to offer for a stable government that need to be called to form the government. So the factor that has to guide is the stability. This is what Folly S. Nariman also talks about. The governor has to invite a responsible and reasonably lasting government. So the objective of the governor is to create a responsible and reasonably lasting government which is centered around stability. So in this context, the BJP has argued other way around in Goa, Meghalaya and Manipur, where a single largest coalition was asked to form the government by the governor. But in Karnataka, there was a U-turn and single largest party is asked to form the government. It means the governor is more acting there to the directions of the center. So he is obviously being stamped as the agent of the center. So from our civil's perspective, is governor an agent of the center? A constitutional head can be a question. So for that question, the answer is governor should be true to the oath of office. That can be your conclusionary remarks, which are the opinions of Folly S. Nariman. Architecture of the mandate. So here Gopala Krishna Gandhi, what he states is India or else opposition parties in India shall come together to fight a common enemy, that is BJP. So previously the same argument was surrounding the Congress. All the parties have come together to fight the Congress. So the first democratic revolution and second democratic revolution in 1967 and 77 have happened due to opposition parties coming together in India. The single party dominant system got collapsed because of this. So the same thing with the pole being the BJP is being said by Mr. Gopala Krishna Gandhi. The East Asian reset, this can be a question this year. That's why be careful about this. Because there are many changes that are happening in East Asia. You know, North Korea, South Korea, and then Japan and China relations. So there is a lot of reconciliation in East Asia happening. And the theater of competition for East Asian economies, it is not in their area, but it is in Southeast Asia. So that's why East Asia, reconciliation and competition in Southeast Asia, and how India can be affected, that based on this a question can be structured. But East Asia, we can expect one good question this year. Or in the history they may ask you Second World War or post World War II reorganization of the East Asia and how they are working today. The East Asian Summit, here you have Japan and China's reapproachment with each other. So you know that they are the bitter enemies because World War II pains are still, or wounds are still open for China. And then second is the China territorial disputes are there. You know that Senkaku Islands, Diaoyu Islands. Diaoyu it is called in China, Senkaku in Japan. So both the China and Japan claims that. So in this context, in spite of these differences, why they are reapproaching? It is the changed geopolitical circumstances. Mr. Trump can be stated as a reason to make China, Japan to talk to each other. So unilateral sanctions of the Trump, economic sanctions, tariffs which he has imposed on aluminum and steel, so send the signals to the Japan that America is going to protect its own interests rather than the interests of the allies. So economic interests need to be safeguarded. This made China, which is a victim of the Trump's sanctions, to move close to Japan. And second, there is an intertwined business between China and Japan. So these relations are tense, but business is always growing between these two countries to the tune of $350 billion. So these business interests want a stable relation between these two countries. Third is North Korea. If you see, Japan, which is a regional power over there, is nowhere figuring in the talks of US with North Korea. So South Korea is figured, North Korea is figured, US is figured, China is figured, but Japan is left out. Recently, a missile which was tested by North Korea, it went into Japan, in the Sea of Japan. So in this context, Japan wants a country to take its concerns to North Korea. And US is not that country, Japan is looking for China on that front. And China sees it as its rising international influence. The reason is, its very enemy is asking for its help. And the third thing, with regard to Belt and Road Initiative, China needs help of Japan. So till now, Japan did not officially approve BRI and it wants it to be transparent. And Japan is also developing with India an alternative to BRI. So the China wants the official sanction of Japan to this. And China and Japan are planning to work joint infrastructure projects, AIIB, and then we have this Chinese Asian Development Bank. They are developing the common development projects. Now see, Japan one way moving close to China, and the other way, Japan is part of Quad. So Quad is meant for long-term strategic interests. And then Japan and China are the serious competitors for the markets in Southeast Asia. And also Japan is actively supporting the Southeast Asian countries on South China Sea. So it means they're strategically they still are inimical to each other, but tactically, because of the changed geographic situation, they are appearing moving close to each other. So that's how we can see it as. Growing cities. So this is a new report which has come up from UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. So this department, this says about that the urbanization is going to be much faster in India. By 2028, Delhi will be the most populated. By 2050, more than 50% of the Indian population will be in urban areas. It means it's the time we need to focus on urban amenities, urban infrastructure, urban governance. But all these things are in chaos. It's an magnanimous civic failure in India. So slums, these are rampant. Urban transport, and it suffers from major congestions. So we have to develop the public transport out there. And the third thing is there is a lot of mismanagement, lack of decentralization. It impacts the governance even today. So in this context, urban reform has to be the priority of the government. So it is going to happen. What is that? The migration from rural to urban areas. Whatever the steps the government may take, because urban centers are becoming the economic powerhouse, it becomes a magnet to attract the people from the nearby towns and the rural areas. Obviously, the urbanization is going to happen and we shall get prepared for this. Should we do away with I&B ministry? So this topic, see the larger picture of it. Do we need to have regulation by the state or do we need to have independent regulatory authorities? So in our syllabus we have the regulatory authorities. So this debate can be asked in the context of the I&B ministry. So most of the regulatory institutions in India, they are not financially independent. So they are dependent upon the respective ministries. Even if you talk about TRAI, SEBI, though they are independent commissions, they are dependent on their respective ministries for the financial assistance. And Prasara Bharati in India is no way different. So how can we structure the argument? Remember, so independent commissions are necessary to ensure growing specialization, deal with specialization, to ensure autonomy, and then they are also necessary to provide for something called level playing field between the various actors. And third, globalization, it has favored for independent regulatory commissions over the government regulation. So government can act as a propaganda machinery of using I&B. So we have seen during emergency how the I&B ministry was misused. And second, Across the world, the BBC, if you take as an example, it is totally free from the government control. Our Prasara Bharati also need to be free from the government control. And the third thing is, most of the times INB ministry is managing the institutions which can be autonomously managed. And fourth, reforms are very late because of the involvement of the ministry, which is trying to protect its own interests. So, the reforms, if it has to be fast paced, let's take censor board need to be abolished. In the place of the censor board, we need to get something called as a rating of the movies, where 13 plus, 15 plus, etc. So it means Cinematography Act must be amended. But even Sham Benegal committee has recommended for the same. Nothing has come out till date. So the reforms are not getting fast paced because of the government interests. So that's the reason why what we can say it can be abandoned. On the other hand, social media is growing today. So there is a fake news which is spreading all out. So there has to be clear official stand of the government on various issues. So government can propagate its own voice if it has its own apparatus in hand. But it's a very faulty argument that if the government gives an official stand, every private channel is going to spread it out. And second is, the INB ministry is not just the regulatory authority, it is controlling or managing many of the institutions like Film and Television Institution of India. That is the second argument. I will put it as this way, why the INB ministry has to manage that? Why can't it be autonomously managed? Or why can't we give it a university status? So that is the second question. Simply I can state it as, INB ministry, it wants to continue itself and its relevance because the government needs it. So if you see, almost 5,000 crore rupees is spent by the Modi government on its propaganda. And the UPA is no different. State governments are no different. So that's why we need to do away with this and let's bring in independent authorities. Let the people finance it. So let the people pay for the viewership. If you see UK, people pay for BBC. That's why BBC is accountable only to the people. The same situation can come up in India too. We are battling terrorists, Pakistani army. It's a propaganda exercise again. So Pakistan army wants to show to the world how responsible it is and how it is trying to provide for the welfare of the people. If army itself is being involved with the welfare of the people, that's a very big joke. So in this context, see the army people standing in line, that itself shows that this is a controlled, conditional setup. And then, again, South Korea, North Korea, heat is rising up. So America wants to keep up denuclearization as a precondition for summit. Obviously, North Korea is not going to agree to that. And South Korea and America did an exercise, air exercise recently. Obviously, that's a threat to North Korea. So, to what extent this summit is going to happen, I have the doubts from very beginning. So much of North Korea's magnanimity, I was unable to take it. So in this context, again the heat is growing up. Finally, I gave you the notes that is available at laix.in/civilsprep. Thank you very much and all the best.